Good morning. Very nice to see you all here this morning. This morning I'm giving a talk that I've titled Heaven and Hell. I know some people who are going through some very difficult times right now. And I think if we pay attention to what's going on in the world, we can see that a lot of people are going through some very difficult times. And perhaps we're going through some difficult times ourselves. And if we're not, odds are we have done this at some point. We've gone through some times that are very difficult for us. And I'm not going to enumerate what those different difficulties are, because once you do that, people start ranking the difficulties and they go, well, that's more of a problem than that is. So what I'm talking about are those moments that seem like they're never going to end. Those difficulties that just seem like they're never going to end. And it feels like we can't possibly make it through. And maybe we even know that we're not going to make it through those difficult times. And as I was thinking about this, people I've been talking with, a story came to mind that I haven't thought about in a while. And I thought I would share with you the story and talk with you a little bit about this story. The story has two characters in it, a samurai, and in the version that I found, a little monk. A big, tough samurai once went to see a little monk. Monk, he barked in a voice accustomed to instant obedience. Teach me about heaven and hell. The monk looked up at the mighty warrior and replied with utter disdain, teach you about heaven and hell? I couldn't teach you about anything. You're dumb. You're dirty. You're a disgrace, an embarrassment to the samurai class. Get out of my sight. I can't stand you. The samurai got furious. He shook, red in the face, speechless with rage. He pulled out his sword, prepared to slay the monk. Looking straight into the samurai's eyes, the monk said softly, that's hell. The samurai froze, realizing the compassion of the monk who had risked his life to show him hell. He put down his sword and fell to his knees, filled with gratitude. The monk said softly, and that's heaven. So that's the story. It's kind of a moving story, memorable. There's a lot going on in that story, but what's interesting to me is the way that it starts. This samurai, he asked to be taught about heaven and hell. He asked to be taught about it, but we live it every day, heaven and hell. Or if we don't live it every day, we live it through the course of our life. And yet he needs that monk to teach me about this that we live every day. And that's what we do. So there's something very human about what this samurai does throughout this story. We come up with ideas and we come up with things, and we got these ideas and these things, and we think we know them, and we realize we don't know these things because they're really just objects of mind. We really can't know them the way that we think we do. And so then they become mysterious to us and we go, I don't understand these. And then we need to have them explained to us, or we feel we do. So then we go out into the world to get answers about what we don't seem to be understanding that's taking place right now. Overlooking, in the process of doing that, overlooking our direct experience, overlooking what is actually taking place, that just now, it's heaven. Teach me about heaven. Well, just now is heaven. Just now is hell. And it's not even that. We would just sit with this. It's just this. Though that shows up in this. Reality is this and that. reality is that and this. Reality is coming and going thus. So maybe when we hear this story, we might think to ourselves, well, my experiences aren't that bad. I don't experience the world in terms of heaven and hell. I know that certainly when I was younger, I don't think I'm that bad anymore, but everything was kind of in those terms. It was like, oh my God, this is so awful. Or this is fantastic. And I would just be ecstatic in the great and really complaining in the bad. I'm sure it was annoying to be around sometimes, to be honest. I know there were a couple things, I can think of, just thinking about, again, thinking about the triviality of this way that I was experiencing it. So thinking about what I'm trying to say right now, that it might not always seem like heaven and hell. If I would get a writer that I would like, and you were going to be trapped having a conversation with me, I was going to extol to you the virtues of this writer until your ears fell off. And I do remember somebody reading one of the authors I was doing this about. And when I discovered, they said, oh, what'd you think? I was like, no, what are you talking about? And it just didn't even make sense to me. So maybe our life doesn't seem to have these kinds of extremes, and instead life is more like just I don't know, purgatory. But in the end, what it gets down to, whether or not you're going to say, well, I don't experience heaven and hell, that's too extreme. What we're really talking about is ingratitude and gratitude, or gratefulness and not being grateful. Now, if we look back at this samurai, of course, what he does is, again, we're back to the story. He doesn't know what's going on, or he doesn't think he knows what's going on, so he goes somewhere looking for an answer. And then when he does that, he makes his demand, and then he expects the right answer. In other words, there's something he's expecting from this exchange. He comes out and he makes a demand. He commands to get what he wants. And in fact, what he says is he barks in a voice accustomed to instant obedience. Accustomed to instant obedience. I have a friend who, for many years, was a police officer. And his family is a family of police officers. So his dad was a police officer. His uncle was a police officer. His brother was a police officer. A couple cousins were police officers. I've seen a picture of them all together wearing their police outfits, and they would go on family vacations every year. And one year they went out boating. And what they discovered was nobody wanted to drive the boat. And nobody wanted to drive the boat because everybody else was going to tell them what they needed to do. And because they were the police, they were expecting instant obedience. They weren't used to people saying no. So tempers would flare. Now that's that samurai. He's expecting instant obedience. But again, if we just look at what's going on there, we might not think of it as we expect instant obedience, but we kind of do. We go out there and we make our demands of reality. We command to get what we want. We go to do things, right? We do things to get things back. We do this all the time. And then when it doesn't, it frustrates us, just like it does the samurai. Because the samurai makes his command and then he doesn't get what he wants, or at least he doesn't think that he does. And I'll be talking more about that in a moment. But the samurai doesn't get what he wants. He's, monk, teach me this. And the monk says, no, you're just a worthless, I'm not going to teach you anything. And then he loses his cool. And we might think, reading this story, that's hell. That's hell right there. He gets angry. He loses his cool, right? And if we know Buddhist teachings, we might know that anger is one of the 3 poisons of mind that bind us to suffering and ignorance. But anger is also just an emotion, right? It just comes up. It's a feeling that arises. It's can be no more, I have the word insidious in my notes, and I do apologize for that, but it's really no more, I don't know, threatening to us than the song of a bird. It's just something that shows up. But here's where it gets to be a problem. Think about what the monk does. So he gets angry and then he acts on it. He acts from his anger. So he doesn't get what he wants. He gets angry and then he pulls his sword out. Now imagine not getting something that you want and what your response to that might be. Imagine, for example, you're at a vending machine and you've just put your last change into that vending machine, and then the thing spirals just up and it doesn't come out. You see the thing you just bought and you don't have any more money. You can't, you're just like, but and so then what do? Maybe we've all been there. We start shaking the machine, kind of hoping that that's going to tip that thing out of the curlicue. And at first, maybe we're just doing it because we're trying to get what we paid for, right? Hey, I just paid my $1.50. I want those M&Ms. And then if we don't get them, if they're not falling, then what? Just ask yourself, then what does it feel like after a while? Have you ever had to abandon the thing? Just go, I'm just not going to get it. And all that you did and all the emotions that came up. So what the samurai does is this anger arises, and then he's going to, well, he's actually located the source of his anger, right? He's located in the little monk. This guy's making me angry, so now he's going to try to get rid of the source of his anger. And we do that too, just like the samurai. We feel a certain way, and then we either blame something for it or we give credit for it. So we might be in a rotten mood and we might say, what's all that road construction? That's summer in Minnesota. You're going to hear that all the time. It actually happened to me in an unusual way last night. I was going over to a friend's house. My husband was driving and he took a different exit. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, it said there's road construction on the street. And he goes, and so I assume that exit is closed. So I'm not even going to go up there. I'm just going to take this. So we're following these detour sites and they took us way, way out of our way. And I just said, I feel like we're no longer in the neighborhood of the house we're going to. Are you sure this is right? And my husband's getting testy, so I had to kind of watch it. And I just say, you sure this is what we want to do? He goes, well, that's what it told me to do. I think that the road's closed on that end. And I said, well, then it's possible it's taking us to the other side of the road. So we just kept following the detours and something else was going on that we could not figure it out at all. My husband just said, I don't think this is right. So he said, check Google Maps. They ought to tell you what the best route is. And I did, and it was exactly the route we had been driving to begin with. And he said, but that's what we were doing. I said, well, let's just try it and see what happens. And so we did. We ended up going back there, and it wasn't even a problem. So there's road construction giving us a headache, and it wasn't even really a headache. But we were so prepared for it to give us a headache that we tried to avoid that in advance, and it just gave us an even bigger headache by doing that. So anyhow, road construction. Maybe we think we're in a foul mood because of road construction. Or maybe we're in a good mood. And we go, yeah, that one of your favorite songs, you just heard that on the radio. Just put you in a good mood. So we do that all the time. And then we try to hang on to the things we like. I really liked hearing that song again. I'm going to go buy that record. I gave that away years ago. I want to buy that record again. Or we try to get rid of what we don't like, what we think makes us uncomfortable. And there's your ingratitude right there. Right? There's our not being grateful for what's showing up. That's where anger is a poison of mind. Right there. Aversion for what is. Here it is. I don't want it. I said I don't want it. Take it back. There's this belief that we have that something's better somewhere else. It's really rooted in the idea that there's something here to begin with. And then we go, well, I got something here, but something seems to be missing. Then there must be another something somewhere else. Go there and get that. And so the samurai is caught up in that. He just does not want what's showing up. The monk was supposed to tell him what heaven and hell were. He was supposed to teach him about that. Now he's refusing to do it. And then he realizes that what he's looking for is right there. It's right there. Right at that moment. But he needs that teacher to help him to see it because he's caught up in it. Right? So in the hell, he's being taught about hell right now. He doesn't realize it because he just wants to answer from the monk, and the monk's not giving the answer, and he's caught up in it. And then the monk shows him right there. Right there's hell. And he can't realize that without the teacher because, again, he's caught up in it. You see, it's the thing about confusion. When we're confused, we're confused. I mean, that's the way it works. When we're confused until we're not. Now, that teacher that teaches us, that points, really what that teacher is doing is pointing directly to what's taking place. That teacher could be anything. The teacher could be coming up against your beliefs, coming up against the things you think are right and wrong, where your certainties suddenly don't seem so certain. That's one teacher. Another teacher could be a pebble hitting a bamboo. That's it. That could be your teacher. Your teacher could be the little monk. But whatever it is, it's going to point you right back to reality. Hell isn't some other place that I have to go learn about. It's right here to be experienced. And then we see, and the samurai sees, it's not reality. It's what he's making of it. And that's what he's realizing. What's this hell? What is this hell? Well, it's his response. Not really what's taking place. But it's real enough. I say it's not what's really taking place, but it's real enough when we're lost in confusion. It's real. The feelings of despair that we have in those difficult times, that anger that rises up in us, right there. Then the samurai wakes up to the truth. And when he does, he knows compassion. So what he realizes, again, he says, when the monk says that's hell, the samurai froze, realizing the compassion of the monk who risked his life to show him hell. So the samurai knows compassion right there. He knows, he realizes the compassion of the monk. In wisdom is the realization of compassion. In that knowing is the realization of compassion. And I think it's quite telling that at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, which is one of the great wisdom sutras, that the character who starts that sutra out is Avalokiteshvara, who's the bodhisattva of compassion. And what Avalokiteshvara does at the beginning of that sutra is wakes up. Avalokiteshvara sees wisdom. And those two come together. So the samurai realizes the monk's compassion when he realizes the monk's wisdom. And when I say realize it, I don't mean he just knows it. He doesn't know in the way that we conventionally talk about knowing. He actually realizes the monk's wisdom. He experiences it. He experiences it and he realizes that. So he comes back to this, experience. This is the skill of the monk. This is the skill of the monk, and it is also the nature of Buddhist teaching. You might hear this all the time. It's not necessarily about the words, though the words have to be part of it. I don't know how else. I suppose there are other things I could be doing. I could be doing a dance. I don't know how clearly that teaching would be communicated, but it's not so much about the words, but it's about the realizing of wisdom. That's it. That's what these teachers, that's why, teachers will say, don't remember what I'm saying to you, because that's not really the point. I mean, you can. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But the real point is to realize wisdom. That's the point of the teaching, and that's what the samurai does. And when the samurai realizes wisdom, he realizes compassion. And so he realizes compassion, he puts up his sword. Right? He no longer keeps it drawn. He's no longer threatening the monk with it. He's filled with gratitude for the monk. He's filled with gratitude. There's no more room for that anger. He's filled with gratitude. He's grateful for what is, which remember was hell. This is heaven, the monk says. So, just as with the samurai at the beginning, when he's in hell, it's hard for us to be grateful for what is when we think it isn't what we want. So it's hard for us to be grateful for what is when it isn't what we think we want. And look what the samurai did. And just think about your own life. I mean, who wants to go through these difficult times? So as long as that's how it's showing up for us, is what that experience was for the samurai when he wasn't getting what he wanted, when he thought he wasn't getting what he wanted. That is hell right there. That's being caught up in and lost in hell. And it's hard for us when we're there, caught up there in that despair, in that anger. It's hard for us to be grateful. And people might hear a teaching like this and they go, oh, so anything that comes my way, I'm supposed to be grateful about. See, you're still caught up in it. You're still thinking about the fact, I can't be grateful about that. As long as that's what's showing up, then we've got hell. Then we're not grateful for what's showing up. As soon as the samurai realized reality, as soon as that happened, then he was filled with gratefulness, filled with it. And there was compassion and there was wisdom. But that's it. You can't make that happen. You actually have to see it. You have to realize it. You have to know it. Now, what may be harder for us to see is that the story points to something beyond what the samurai wants or what he doesn't want, what he's grateful for or what he's ungrateful for. So what he realizes is that he has to experience hell. He has to know hell to get to heaven. And when we look at the story, I think there's a difficulty with the story. It's hard for us to see that the story is pointing to something beyond what the samurai wants or doesn't want, because the samurai wanted to know about heaven and hell. And it seems like he got what he wanted. But just think again about how he got to know that. I mean, it looks like he got to know it, but how did he get to know it? He got to know, again, heaven by knowing hell. He had to go to hell to know heaven. And who wants to go to hell? I mean, who wants to go through that? Most of us don't. Somebody shared with me a story about giving birth. It's actually, somebody's probably listening to this talk right now. But when she started experiencing the pain, she kind of withdrew from it. And the midwife said, well, what are you doing there? He said, well, that hurt. So I'm kind of pulling back. She said, you know why you're here, right? You're going to have to go through it, but we pull back. We don't want to feel that. His gratitude for the fearlessness of the monk is gratitude for having experienced hell and knowing it for what it is, having seen it for what it is. And in that, he realizes heaven. But that still kind of gets us into this heaven and hell. And I'm saying that the story actually points to something beyond heaven and hell. But it doesn't exclude heaven and hell. In fact, it includes heaven and hell. And that's we can start to see that heaven and hell are completely dependent on one another. They're interdependent. Without hell, no heaven. No heaven unless we know hell. Without heaven, no hell. No hell unless we can contrast it against the stuff we're grateful for. You know, in other words, we know what we want in life. We know what satisfies us. We know what makes us happy, or so we think. We've got all a litany of that stuff. So we know when we're not happy about what's showing up and what's, and there we have it. And those two come together. So they're completely interdependent. Can't really have one without the other. Each, as we're experiencing it, as Steve Hagen points out to us, each is real enough when we experience them. Each one. When we're feeling heaven, we can't deny that. Who's going to deny that? What a lovely feeling. Right? When we're experiencing difficulties, we can't deny that feeling. It's right there. And it's unpleasant. And yet, if we can see their thoroughgoing interpenetration, if we can see that without one, there's not the other, then we can actually see that they are both really just experience of reality, of totality, of which heaven and hell are part. Then we can know heaven and hell without being caught up in heaven and hell, and yet we can see that there's heaven and hell, those experiences of heaven and hell. But we don't get caught up like the samurai does in hell, where we're confused and we can't see out of it. We can see that it is this expression of totality, that it is just what it is that's showing up. And then we can know both heaven and hell. And that's what it seems to me that this story is ultimately pointing out, what it is that the samurai realizes. So he gets released from hell, and now he can see beyond that and see that the two are actually inseparable. As I said before, hell's not reality, it's just what we make of it. And here's the reality. Same thing with heaven. You realize what it was that was taking place. And in that, there was that release from the resistance, from the ingratitude. So, there's my story. I don't know if people have comments, observations, or questions.
Just how would you define hell then?
So you're like that samurai then. I'm not going to tell you. Right, that's the thing. It is to directly experience. What is it? To know what it is to really know it. Anything I tell you, that's going to put us right back at square one again, isn't it? But it's a good question. How do we know it? Well, that's exactly the problem that samurai has. And he wants to know, damn it. Yeah.
Is it the absence of gratitude?
But again, see, we want to pin that down. You'll know how when you're there. You'll absolutely see it. But can you absolutely see it? Can you, what the samurai realizes, again, and the teacher just has to say, this is it. But realize that the teacher has to say, this is it in hell. So I think you'll know it when it's there, that this is hell. And that's, again, that's the nature of the story, is we want that definition. We want to know, well, what is it? I do remember once somebody downstairs was saying something like, I can't remember the beginning part of it. I only remember the last part of it, but they might have said like, oh, I get Buddhist heaven, but what is Buddhist hell? And I just happened to be standing right there and I said, here it is. You know, and it's partly in that wanting that definition that you can start to get a little taste of it. But yeah, yeah. Thanks. That's a great question.
When I'm here, I often remember things that Okumura Roshi used to say when he was just Shohaku to it. He often said, or sometimes said, in any given day, some of the time we're in hell, some of the time we're in heaven.
Yeah. That's right. Again, like I said, sometimes it's hard for us to maybe put it in those terms, but it's about that. You know, it's about what are you doing right now? What is the feeling of this experience? Right. And that's what that samurai, I think, experiences too, is again, we might think it's the anger or it's, you know, something like that, but we see him actually acting out of whatever that feeling is that he has. And that's where, you know, that's where we can experience it, is what are we doing right now? Just look right now, what are we doing? So yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, Kristen?
I came across a quote last week that directly relates to what you're speaking to today. I think it was Yamato Roshi. It captivated me because it captured the essence of, I think, what it means to be human, to live a human life and living. And I wanted to share it. So it is just sitting, just walking, just laughing, just weeping. And I just, again, it just resonated. So, and it was directly related.
Yeah. And yes, that's difficult. You know, I was talking to somebody last night. I was at one of the gathering I was at, there were some people who are cyclists, you know, bicyclers. And I was remembering that when I first started riding my bicycle was only a thing that I got on to get me to a place. Like that's kind of how I treated it. And then I started dating the man who became my husband, and he loved just bicycling. And he started taking me down these bicycle trails. And I was like, where am I? I feel like I'm in a magical kingdom right now, you know? So yeah, right. It's when walking, just walk, when biking, just bike. And that is life. That is how life shows up. But we throw other stuff in there. So it's like, I don't like this, or why? Or even it's a magical kingdom. I really like this. Let's bike again tomorrow, even though my legs might be really sore and then suddenly I can't make it up that hill any longer and I have to walk my bike part of the way up. And then suddenly what I thought was going to be another Edenic experience turned into a, let's say, fifth level of hellish experience, right? So there again, we so easily take ourselves out of when doing this, just do this. So again, it brings us back to, so what are we doing right now? What are we doing? And this is it. This is it. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
What about when hell feels good? If the samurai had been a little quicker on the draw and sliced that monk's head off and felt thoroughly justified in doing it.
Oh, that's great. Now what?
You don't find out what's happening now.
Well, again, he found it out because a teacher helped him to see, right? So it will take him to realize what it is that's taking place, you know, for him to wake up to that. You're right about that. You know, so in this story, there is a teacher, because in your story, then that samurai is still, let's say, caught up in the confusion of his anger, right? Or that hellish place that he apparently loves. And there, you know, there are people who seem to relish in things that I would find pretty hellish. And those are a pretty wide range of things. So that's certainly true, but do you really know what's going on there? You know, would the samurai really know what's going on? And I would say, well, no, we're still in that place that Roger was talking about, where every day we experience heaven and hell. And are we trying to get rid of that? No, we're not. But what I'm trying to point out is that when we're caught up in one or the other, it tends to, because of the way that we are, and we start saying, well, that monk caused problems for me. Now he's gone, right? Which, if we think about the precepts, that's a violation of the first precept, which is, the Bodhidharma teaching that goes with this is not nursing a view of extinction. There's a view of extinction, and what was being extinguished? We think, well, it was that little monk, but I think what that samurai is really trying to extinguish is that uncomfortable feeling that he was having, right? That hell, in a way, that he seems to maybe enjoy, but he's trying to get rid of it, right? And there's that. So still caught up in confusion, but can the samurai wake up? Sure, at every moment we can wake up. Every moment we could get caught up in heaven and hell and act out of them. Try to push away what we don't like, try to hang on to what we don't like, and then or try to hang on to what we like, and then when we try to hang on to what we like, sometimes what we like turns out to be something we don't like. I used to love smoking cigarettes, great pleasure in smoking cigarettes. Loved smoking cigarettes. And one of the ways I tried to help me stop loving them so much is I decided I was going to just smoke continuously. So I sat down with a pack of cigarettes, a thing I loved to do, and I kept going. And then that cigarette was done, and I lit another cigarette, and I just kept going and kept going. And you know what? That wasn't so fun after a while. Right. So even the stuff that we think brings us heaven, we get caught up in it. It can be hell, and then we get caught up in that. So I don't really exactly know how to answer your question, David, except it's still being caught up in that stuff. It's still acting out of that. It's still confusion. It's still not waking up to this moment. And there might be something that will wake that samurai up. In each moment, we have that opportunity. So it's not that the samurai will be woken up and then he'll never, ever get angry and act out of anger again. It's just every moment we have the opportunity. Is there something that wakes us up at that moment? Because it is about, what are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? So perhaps the samurai's happy for a little bit, and then he stops being happy. He starts to doubt his happiness. He realizes he still doesn't know the difference between heaven and hell. He still needs to learn. So now he's got to go find another monk. And hopefully that monk's not going to, whatever it is. But we just keep getting caught up. Any moment, though, we can realize what's taking place. Great questions. Thank you.